The buzz of tattoo machines filled the studio like a low electric hum, steady and constant, vibrating through the floor and into the bones. Aaliyah Carter paused just inside the doorway. The air smelled of disinfectant and ink, sharp and metallic. Flash art covered the walls, bold skulls, roses, snakes, lettering in styles she didn't recognize. Aaliyah, black, mid-20s, soft-spoken but intentional, had chosen this studio because of its reputation. Clean, professional, award-winning. At least, that's what the reviews said. She adjusted the strap of her purse and stepped forward. "Hi, I have a 2 o'clock appointment." A man looked up from behind the counter. Jason Cole, white, late 30s, heavily tattooed, confident to the point of swagger, gave her a quick once-over before smiling. "Aaliyah, right?" he said. "I'm Jason, your artist." She nodded. "Yes." "Cool," he replied, already walking toward the back. "Let's talk design." Aaliyah followed him into a private booth. She sat down carefully, pulling out her phone and opening the reference image she'd saved weeks ago. "I want this," she said, turning the screen toward him. It was simple. Delicate line work. A small symbol with personal meaning placed just below her collarbone. Jason stared at it for half a second. Then he laughed. "That?" he said. "Nah." Aaliyah blinked. "What do you mean?" He leaned back on his stool. "It's basic, too small. You've got good skin. This deserves something bigger, stronger." Aaliyah's shoulders tightened. "I like it the way it is." Jason waved a hand dismissively. "Trust me, clients always think they want subtle. Then they see the final piece and wish they'd gone bold." "I won't," Aaliyah said quietly. Jason spun his tablet around and began sketching anyway. Thick lines, heavy shading, a completely different design. "This would look amazing on you," he said. "Way more presence." Aaliyah stared at the screen. "That's not what I asked for." Jason smiled like she was missing the obvious. "I'm the professional." The word hung in the air. Aaliyah felt something shift. Not fear, but pressure. The kind that crept in slowly, disguised as expertise. "I'm paying for this," she said, "and I want my design." Jason sighed dramatically. "Look, I don't like putting my name on stuff that looks unfinished." Aaliyah's stomach dropped. "So you won't do it?" "I didn't say that," he replied. "I'm saying you should reconsider." He stood and reached for gloves. "Once we start, you'll see." Aaliyah stood too. "We're not starting." Jason frowned. "You already paid the deposit." "I know," she said, "and I'll walk if I have to." Jason laughed again, shorter this time. "You're overthinking it." Aaliyah crossed her arms, grounding herself. "I'm thinking clearly." Jason shook his head. "Clients always get nervous. It's permanent. I get it." "No," she replied. "You're not listening." The buzz from a machine nearby grew louder, filling the pause. Jason finally leaned forward, his tone changing, firmer now. "Sit down. I'll stencil something close enough." Aaliyah felt heat rise in her chest. Close enough isn't consent. Jason froze. Slowly, he looked at her. "What did you say?" he asked. Aaliyah met his eyes, her voice steady despite the pounding in her ears. "I said close enough isn't consent." Jason exhaled sharply and turned toward the counter. "Fine, then let's do paperwork." He grabbed a clipboard and shoved it toward her. "Sign the consent form." Aaliyah took it and paused. Her eyes moved over the page carefully. Design description. Artist modified original concept. She looked up. "This doesn't describe what I want," she said. Jason shrugged. "It covers me." Aaliyah set the clipboard down on the chair between them. "No," she said calmly. "It stops everything." Jason stared at her, irritation flashing across his face. Because the buzzing machines could be ignored, the pressure could be brushed off. But the consent form? That was the one thing he couldn't work around. And for the first time since she walked into the studio, Aaliyah knew. This wasn't about art, it was about control, and it was about to end right here. Jason stared at the clipboard like it had betrayed him. "Everyone signs that," he said. His voice had lost some of its swagger, replaced by irritation edged with disbelief. "It's standard." Aaliyah didn't move. She remained standing, hands relaxed at her sides, eyes steady on the form. "Standard doesn't mean correct," she replied. "It says you're allowed to change the design." Jason scoffed. "It gives me flexibility." "It gives you control," Aaliyah said, "over my body." That landed harder than anything else she'd said. Jason straightened, jaw tightening. "You're reading too much into it." "I'm reading exactly what's written," Aaliyah answered. "This form doesn't reflect my consent." Jason ran a hand over his beard and let out a sharp breath. "Look, I'm trying to help you get something you won't regret." Aaliyah felt the familiar weight of that phrase. "I know better. You'll thank me later." She'd heard it before, in classrooms, at work, in spaces where her preferences were treated like suggestions. "I won't regret my choice," she said. "I will regret letting someone talk me out of it." Jason picked up the clipboard again and tapped the paper with his pen. "Then tell me what you want me to write." Aaliyah leaned in and pointed. "Describe the design I showed you, size, placement, line work, no modifications without my approval." Jason stared at her finger on the page. "That's not how I work." Aaliyah straightened. "Then we're done." She reached for her purse. Jason laughed, but it sounded forced. "You're really going to walk over a technicality?" "This isn't technical," she said. "It's permanent." Jason shook his head. "You know how many people would kill for a slot with me?" Aaliyah met his eyes. "Then they can have it." The room felt smaller now, the hum of machines pressing in from all sides. Jason looked around as if expecting someone to step in, to back him up. No one did. He lowered his voice. "If you leave, you lose your deposit." Aaliyah nodded. "That's fine." Jason blinked. "You're serious?" "Yes." She took one step toward the exit of the booth. Her heart was racing now, but her resolve was stronger than the nerves. Jason spoke again, louder. "You're being difficult." Aaliyah stopped and turned back to him. "No, I'm being clear." Silence stretched between them. Finally, Jason dropped the clipboard onto the counter with a thud. "Whatever, do what you want." Aaliyah didn't respond. She walked out of the booth, past the front desk, past the flash art on the walls. A few other clients glanced up as she passed, sensing the tension, but not its cause. At the door, Aaliyah paused. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't argued about art styles. She had simply refused to sign away her consent, and that refusal had stopped everything. As she stepped out into the daylight, the buzzing of tattoo machines cut off behind her, Aaliyah realized something important. For the first time since the appointment began, the pressure was gone, and she hadn't lost anything that mattered. Aaliyah didn't go far at first. She stood just outside the studio, the door closing behind her with a soft chime, and let the afternoon air hit her face. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from the delayed release of tension. The kind that came when you realized how close you'd been to letting someone cross a line you'd already drawn. She took out her phone and sat on the low concrete ledge by the window. Inside, through the glass, she could still see Jason moving around the booth. His gestures were sharper now, irritated. He said something to the receptionist, who glanced toward the window and then quickly looked away. Aaliyah exhaled slowly. She opened the booking app the studio used and pulled up her appointment details. Deposit paid. Artist, Jason Cole. Design notes, brief, vague. Nothing like what she'd submitted. She tapped Contact Support. Not to complain, to document. She typed carefully, choosing accuracy over emotion. Artist refused to perform the requested design and pressured me to accept a different one. Consent form described an artist-modified design I did not agree to. I declined to sign and left. She attached screenshots of her original reference image and the consent form language. Then she hit send. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. "Support. We're reviewing your report. Please hold." Aaliyah leaned back against the glass and watched people pass on the sidewalk, unaware of the decision she'd just made. She thought about how easily this could have gone another way. How often people, especially women, were taught to stay, to compromise, to avoid being difficult. Inside the studio, Jason stepped into view again. He noticed her through the glass now and frowned. He said something to the receptionist, then started toward the door. Aaliyah stood up. The door opened. "You really reported me?" Jason asked, his voice low, tight. "I documented what happened," Aaliyah replied. "There's a difference." Jason shook his head. "This is how the industry works." "Not anymore," she said calmly. Jason scoffed. "You're going to make it harder for yourself everywhere you go." Aaliyah met his eyes. "Only in places I don't want to be." Jason opened his mouth, then stopped. His phone buzzed in his hand. He glanced down. His expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. Aaliyah's phone buzzed too. "Support. We've reviewed the consent form language. This appointment has been flagged. Please do not re-enter the studio. A refund review is in progress." Aaliyah looked up. Jason was staring at his screen now, scrolling, jaw clenched. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. Aaliyah didn't respond, because she didn't need to. The conversation was no longer between her and him. It was between him and the document he'd pushed across the table, the one he'd assumed no one would read closely. The consent form hadn't just stopped the tattoo, it had shifted the power completely. And standing there on the sidewalk, with the studio doors slowly closing again between them, Aaliyah understood something with absolute clarity. Saying no hadn't made things harder. It had made them honest. And honesty, once written down, had a way of travelling much further than pressure ever could. Aaliyah went home without a tattoo. And for the first time that day, that felt like a victory instead of a loss. She made tea, changed into comfortable clothes, and sat on her couch as the adrenaline finally faded. The quiet of her apartment felt different now, protective, earned. Her phone lay face up on the table, screen dark, waiting. An hour later, it lit up. Support update. She opened it. The message was longer this time, formal, careful. The studio had been notified. The consent form language had been reviewed. The artist's behaviour was under investigation, and her deposit would be fully refunded. Aaliyah closed her eyes for a moment and let the relief wash through her. Not because of the money, but because the system had worked the way it was supposed to. She hadn't been dramatic, she hadn't been unreasonable, she'd simply refused to sign something that gave away her control. 2 days later, another message arrived. Outcome: artist suspended pending mandatory consent and client communication training. Studio warned for policy violations. Aaliyah read it twice. Jason's name wasn't mentioned directly, but she knew. The studio's reputation, the one that had drawn her in, had cracked just enough for accountability to slip through. A week after that, Aaliyah walked into a different tattoo studio. Smaller, quieter, no flash art screaming from the walls. The artist, a black woman named Renee, sat with her for 20 minutes before touching a pencil. "Tell me what it means to you," Renee said. Aaliyah showed her the same simple design. Renee smiled. "It's beautiful," she said. "Let's keep it exactly that way." When the consent form came out, Aaliyah read it carefully. It described the design precisely. It stated no changes without explicit approval. It centered her choice, not the artist's ego. Aaliyah signed without hesitation. The tattoo itself took less than an hour. Fine lines, gentle pressure, no rushing, no arguing, no rewriting her intentions. When it was finished, Aaliyah looked in the mirror and felt her chest warm, not with adrenaline this time, but recognition. It was exactly what she'd wanted. On her way out, Renee handed her aftercare instructions and said, "Thank you for trusting me." Aaliyah smiled. "Thank you for listening." That night, alone in her room, Aaliyah traced the new tattoo lightly with her finger. It wasn't bold, it wasn't loud, but it was hers. The first studio had tried to teach her something about authority, about expertise, about whose voice mattered most. The consent form had taught something else entirely. That pressure ends where consent begins, that no amount of confidence replaces permission, and that the simplest word, no, can stop everything when it's backed by clarity and ink on paper. Aaliyah turned off the light and went to sleep, knowing one thing for certain. Her tattoo wasn't just a design, it was proof that her body, her choices, and her voice were never up for negotiation.